Rogue One, a Star Wars story. As you guys can see, got my lightsaber here. I would keep this on, but as you can hear, it's insanely loud. I wish I could always have this on and do my Star Wars reviews. I know that's like super loud with the camera, I'm sorry, but I had to do that. But Rogue One, a Star Wars story. So, this movie was freaking fun. You know, it didn't have a million years. I don't know why. I don't remember when Force Awakens was announced, but of course that was the first one in a year, so it was like everyone's losing their effing mind. I think a lot of people were still losing their minds over this, myself included, but it was kind of like, alright, we got like a year and a half to get hyped for this. It was like, alright, we know what to expect. I think we were much calmer this time than like, oh my god, it's the first Star Wars in forever. I don't think we like lost our minds. In fact, I know we didn't, because when I saw this movie, there were not a lot of people in the theater, which I thought was really weird. I think most of them went to an early showing, because I saw this at 9, but there was a showing at like 7 p.m., and I'm pretty sure a bunch of people were already there. I got to the theater, and I was in the restroom of the theater, and all I could hear were like, it was just like, boom, like it was shaking on the other side was the theater that they were already playing Star Wars, and all I could think was, oh man, they're at the end of Star Wars, because it was just explosion after explosion. It was just like boom and shaking. I was like, I can't wait to see this movie. But going into it, I was super amped up, and it was so different. It was such a different experience, because there's so many things I don't want to mention that I feel like are supposed. This is actually my second time doing this, and the reason I decided to redo it was because I was like, I said a couple things that aren't really spoilers, but I want to keep them vague because they were really interesting surprises. So I decided to redo this. Plus, I was talking so long about it that my camera actually cut off on me. But I was like, you know what? I will redo it, and kind of refrain from some of those spoilers. So I'm gonna get to those first, because now I know how to make them even more vague so that it's not a big surprise. One of the big things is actually the music. It's not as much of the typical Star Wars music as you might expect. There are actually a lot of new themes in this. The happy themes are actually different. Some of the darker themes are different as well. And it's like, I like that idea. Because, it's not within the normal, well, I shouldn't say the normal Star Wars universe. It's not within the normal trilogies that we typically get. So, excuse me, when you hear the themes you're familiar with, they're actually few and far between. It's not like, oh, here's, of course Darth Vader isn't in it a ton, so it's not like you're going to hear the Empire theme all the freaking time. But you hear it a little bit. Of course, you hear his theme in there as well. But I actually like that idea. I was like, the musical themes are different. The hopeful themes are different, and it's very interesting hearing that, because it's like, holy crap, I know exactly what theme would go here, but it's a different song because it's different for how, this movie even exists within the universe. And I was like, I actually like that. And I don't know, I would love to see them do that for all of the Star Wars story. I hate that subtitle. I gotta be honest, I've always hated that. Like, once it changed and it was like Rogue One, a Star Wars story, I've always hated that. I still prefer just Star Wars Rogue One. But in a sense, after having seen the film, I kind of get why they changed that. And I was like, oh, I think I understand based on the opening of the way the movie starts. And I actually like that idea. I was like, okay, I guess I understand how it plays out. It's very different. It's not what you would expect from a Star Wars film, the opening of it, which I think a lot of people can appreciate because of how they did Rogue One, and like I said, how it's different from the trilogy style. But I like that. I thought it was cool. I was like, alright, I can accept that because this is different. Just like the music, I can accept that it's um, sort of a different pacing, I should say, I guess is the best way to put it. It's a different pacing for how they do the openings. So I thought that was cool. Getting into the actual Rebels and the Empire, I loved what they did. Like, of course, this movie was meant to be dark. That's what everyone's saying. Like, it's the darker version of the, it's darker part of the Star Wars universe. And they certainly did it well. Like, I love what they did with the Alliance. Like, we have some of our characters, being a part of the Alliance and stuff like that. Getting to see them as a part of the Alliance isn't exactly what you'd expect, where it's like, oh, the good guys fight the bad guys. The good guys do some pretty interesting stuff in this film. And I was like, okay, this isn't just like, yeah, we're the Alliance, save everybody type of situation. It's like, sometimes you just get information and you get the F out. And, lives be damned sort of situations. And I was like, huh, Don't see that too often in Star Wars. That's not super happy, campy Star Wars style. This is some serious. This is war stuff. Like the way they play it is great with, the battles and even just the concepts. Even outside of the battles, just some of the dialogue and how the characters act and things is really new because we don't see that side of the Alliance, and I love that. I was like, that's actually really great. So, thought that was really great. The characters in this, I think, all get some really good screen time as far as the actual characters of the team Rogue One, the main characters. Of course, it starts with our main character, and this is one of the things I was talking with my girlfriend, of course, after we saw it, that she didn't like, and I think this is something people talked about in Force Awakens as well. The orphan thing, we've seen it. It's literally the crux of Star Wars, apparently, because it's the prequels, of course, with Anakin, and then, of course, with Luke, he's, a pseudo-orphan, like, basically less than halfway through the movie, he's an orphan for sure again. And the same thing kind of applies in this film as well, like, kind of halfway, like, even if you saw the trailer, it's like, okay, we know kind of how this plays out, so it's like, at least halfway, Jun is a bit of an orphan, so it was like, yeah, they kind of did that, and once again, technically speaking, yeah, the Death Star is in the film, so it's like, that's the big issue, but of course they aren't going to destroy it. They're just going to get plans for it. So it's a bit different. Death Star is also cool. It shows up a little bit more than you might expect. It's not just like, oh, here's that Death Star, and that's really it, because of course they're going for the plans. So you actually do get to see it in different ways, which I thought was cool. They're on it in certain sequences. You see it because it's like, okay, well, we're working on it, so it's in different places. They're doing different things to it, so it gets worked on in different parts of the galaxy, stuff like that. So I was like, that's kind of cool. I didn't actually expect that. So you see like a bit more. Personally, I think it's way more than you might expect. I didn't think it would even be in more than one scene, to be totally honest, and it definitely is. So I'm like, okay, yeah, and it does. Like, it just looks great. Like, I mean, just the models. Like, you don't see, well, actually, you do see like the whole thing. They do a couple of different angles, but the models, like when they do that first shot of the Death Star and they have some Star Destroyers next to it, it was just like the trailer. I was like, God, I love this, because it's like, that is those Star Destroyers. I don't know about the Death Star itself, but the Star Destroyers, I was like, those are clearly just models. Like, they didn't even look painted. They look like they're just white models. And I was like, that looks so good. That's so old school, and it looked amazing. On the big screen, I was like, those are just models. Those are just little toys, and they're really, really close right now. And I was like, that just looks really cool to me. It was a super nerd thing, but with it being Star Wars, the practical stuff, it does, tend to stick out. So I really love that. Akin to Force Awakens, they did a lot of practical effects. There, of course, are some CG things in here as well. But for the most part, I think pretty much 100%, honestly. I think all the CG stuff, it made sense. Like, okay, that makes sense to be CG. That makes sense that they could do it practical. There's like one thing that I was like, that could have been practical, because I've literally seen it done practical in other Star Wars films. So that was like the only thing, and it wasn't even that big of a deal, and it was technically different, but I was like, I feel like that definitely could have been practical. It seemed minor, but at the same time, I don't do movie special effects makeup, so nothing's really minor if it's practical or CG to say that. But definitely did well on the CG stuff. There are two very specific instances that are absolutely phenomenal. I just I can't even explain it without giving certain things away, but they are absolutely insane, and I love them. So I'll talk about that in my spoiler discussion, but those two instances are some of the best CG I've ever seen. And then I don't know. There's not much else I can say about that without spoiling certain things, but you'll know it when you see it, for sure. Like, you will know it 100% what I'm talking about once you see it within the film, because it's great. But getting back to the actual story elements, I love what they did with the story. I think, for the most part, the pacing was good. Of course, I say for the most part, because this is like literally the one issue I have with the entire film, is that after, I'd say, the second, it's like the first really big battle sequence that they have, first really big event that takes place in the film. They have a couple like important things, but this is like the first hill, I guess, if you're going like, story wise, where it's like climbing to the climax and all that. This is like the first bit where it's like, okay, that happened. After that, it dips and it stays low for a pretty long time to me. Like, it was a lot of talking, and it was like, here's talking here with Rogue One, this little group, and then here's talking with the Empire. And that's not good you're switching back and forth between a lot of stuff, which I feel like it was about 30 minutes long, and it was just straight talking, and it wasn't super intense talking where it's like, oh, they're arguing or they're fighting to try to figure out how it's going. It was basically like they're kind of agreeing, and they're just going along. It's like, this is what's going to happen, and this is what we want. And then there's a little bit of tension in there, but it's not enough to be like, holy crap, that's entertaining. It's just like, okay, this is tension, and I kind of expected this. On the Empire side of things, that's awesome. The main villain for this, whose name I, of course, don't remember because I suck at names, he was great. I thought he was an awesome villain in this, and the way they did his story is why I loved his character so much, because it's not what you might expect for the Empire, and just the dynamic with him and Vader, and then they had a third character in there. The dynamic between the three of them I thought was great. Vader kind of was, Vader's Vader, so he's kind of his own awesome thing, and oh god, he has an amazing sequence in the film that I can't even spoil. But I'll just say I could watch that sequence for the entire length of the film, and I might get bored like within the last 2 minutes. But it was great, and that's all I can say about that if you haven't seen the movie, but it was great. So he has that, but the dynamic of the Empire I thought was good. We get to see, because we have like our main villain, the dude who's dressed in all white, who, I gotta be honest, I thought he looked super sweet through like the whole movie. I'm like, he looks really cool, because we never, in live action at least, we never get to see the characters that are dressed in white. We always see characters like, we see Vader, of course. You see the Emperor, where he's got the cloak on like a Sith, and he's dressed just in black. You see characters like Grand Moff Tarkin and stuff like that. Characters like him who are just like a bunch of random old dudes who are all dressed in gray all the time. Those are the type of characters that we get to see, and we never see characters like like a lot of people thought this character might be Grand Admiral Thrawn, because he wears white all the time. And if you watch Star Wars Rebels, he's in that right now. So it's like, oh, we get to see a character dressed in all white, and everyone else is dressed in gray. But we had that in this movie, and I was like, that looks really cool. Like, he looked really sweet. He also has, like, a super long cape, and, like, the opening sequence when he's just standing, which I believe is in the trailer as well, where they just show him standing. He's standing, and it's just, like, a shot of him. In the trailer, I think it was, like, a couple seconds, of course. In the movie, he stands there. It felt like they just were like, you look cool, so let's just hold this and just let the wind blow, because his cape was just, like, rustling. It was super crazy. It was crazy windy, because they may have had a fan on him, I would assume so. But he's just standing there. The troopers are standing next to him. They're, all black and stuff, and he's in the white. And I was like, he just looks cool. The whole movie, I was like, he's kind of pimped out in this thing. He's got the, cape and everything. He was like Lando, but just in all white and an even longer cape. But he just looked cool to me, and I was like, that's sweet that they put that in there. They have some other things in here as well that they put into a live-action Star Wars film for the first time, and that I really loved as a big Star Wars fan. They talk about... let me see. This is in the trailers. So they talk about kyber crystals. If you don't know what that is, you've seen it, but you can probably, if you watch the trailer again, you know what I'm talking about. It's a crystal, so you've seen the crystal. So they talk about those, which are great, because they're so important to the Star Wars universe. They they actually reference Jedi quite a bit in this, which I thought was really interesting. They actually use the term Jedi, especially coming off of The Force Awakens, where it's like, Jedi are real and stuff like that, which even in A New Hope, it was kind of like, oh, they're sort of a myth and stuff like that to a lot of people. But because you have characters involved with, the Alliance, and of course the Empire, who's involved with Vader and the Emperor, people throw out Jedi like all the freaking time in this movie, and I'm like, that's actually kind of sweet. Like Donnie Yen's character, he's very in tune with the Force and stuff like that. He's not exactly a Force user or anything. He might be, I don't really know. I really can't get into the explanation of that without spoiling certain things, and of course, it's still super vague, to be totally honest, so I'll let you guys figure that out for yourselves, because they do that all the time in Star Wars. Even like with Han, people are like, he might be a Force user, or at least Force sensitive, but Donnie Yen's character, he's at least definitely that, and that's even in the trailers. That's not a spoiler, that's in the trailers that he's Force sensitive. Or or at least in tune with the Force or something. Like I said, I don't know if that's a difference. Um, but, they throw the term Jedi around a lot. They don't throw around Sith too much, despite Darth Vader actually being in it. But I guess, when you see Darth Vader, it's like, we don't need to say Sith all the time because he's tall and kind of scary. But the Jedi aren't here to mess with us, so let's just throw that out all the time. But I like that. I thought that was really cool. Of course, with this movie being what it is, and people being like, all right, well, some people gotta go, it gets dark. They get dark early on, too. They get dark early on where it's just like, all right, this is about to happen. You got rebellions here. You got some offshoot rebellion stuff going on over here. And it gets crazy. Sometimes people fight back. Sometimes they make it. Sometimes they don't. Things just get intense periodically throughout the film. And stuff just happens. It's like, all right, you just gotta keep making it dark, huh? Just piece by piece, it has to get dark. But the movie was fun. The ending battle sequence is amazing. It's all over the place, where it's kind of like Return of the Jedi, where it's like you have this going on, and this going on, and this going on. It's like 3 separate battles in one. So that I always love. Um, I think the Empire, honestly, is the best part of the entire film. As much as I like the characters, which, admittedly, I didn't get super attached to them. I think because they're all brand new characters, and it's like 5 new characters all at once. They get a good chunk of time, but it's not like, most Star Wars films where it's like, okay, yeah, you have supporting characters, but these are like all main characters. Of course, Jen is like the main character, but everyone, I think, gets a fair amount of time, so it's almost like, yeah, she's like the first main character, but everyone's a main character still. So it starts off with her, and then pretty quickly on, it kind of starts to branch out. Like, okay, here's everyone else's important parts in the film. So it's like, all right, she doesn't take up as much time as you might think as the main character, but of course she has certain points that are like set for her because she is the main character. But I didn't mind that. It was just like, all right, and I'm not super crazy attached to the characters. It's not like, they'll have an impact, a lasting impact, but it won't be like, oh, that's like Obi-Wan Kenobi or even Qui-Gon Jinn. I have a greater impact for because of his character and his role in like the Phantom Menace and what he did compared to these characters, where it's kind of just like, kind of almost a ragtag group of characters where you learn about all of them at once. As where, once again, Phantom Menace, it's like, all right, Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Padme are like the 4 characters, and Jar Jar. But it's fine. You just don't get like a huge attachment. I didn't, at least. But I like the characters, and of course they all have their costumes and stuff. I don't know why I was picking that up in this movie, but I was finally thinking about it before I saw it. Like, you know what? I'm gonna see what they wear in this movie, because Star Wars is like a cartoon where nobody changes outfits until they get shot or cut, and that's it. Like, other than that, you have the same outfit the whole movie, and it's like a cartoon. It's kind of funny, but I was paying attention to that, and it's like, all right, let's see how much they really change. But it was cool. I like the characters. I think pretty much everybody had at least a pseudo action moment, or something intense happened for at least for every single character within the sort of Rogue One group. Had some cool references to A New Hope. They have like 3 references to Obi-Wan, which is cool, and I'll get into those in my spoiler section. 2 of which are super obvious. Another one, just look at the names that show up, and you'll probably see the reference, because I'm like, I think that was a reference. It could just be an insane coincidence, but I highly doubt it. But just look at some of the titles that show up, and it might be obvious to you too, because you'd be like, that reminds me of Obi-Wan, and then the very next scene, something interesting might happen based on what you read. So I'll just throw that out there, because some people might miss it, and it might just be a cool little reference for you to find. But I thought it was fun. I'm very curious to see how they continue this sort of story, where they do, Star Wars stories, and it's, one set story. If they'll ever do stuff where it's like, hey, here's a continuation of Rogue One, which I highly doubt they'd ever do that because the huge gap. But they might also do stuff in between Empire and Return, and between Return and Force Awakens, which they might not touch that too much, because they'll probably be doing a lot of flashbacks already from in between Return and Awakens, once we get some more of that backstory with Luke and, the Jedi Temple that he made or found or whatever. So they probably won't touch too much of that, but we got a couple more. We got, of course, Han Solo coming up. I'm pretty sure we're still supposed to get the Boba Fett movies. So I'm curious where they're going to put him in and how they're going to do it, if they'll ever decide this Star Wars story was so good, it deserves a sequel, or you know how that's going to play out if they ever even have one that could continue. So I am curious how that might play out, and if they'll ever, you know, even consider doing that, or if they'll be like, well, if it might get a sequel, just toss it into, you know, the main franchise. So we'll see how that plays out. But I did enjoy the film. Of course, if you're a Star Wars fan, you will also enjoy it. Like I mentioned, my one issue with it is the fact that it had that lull towards the center after like that big first really huge action moment. It's just like, ugh. It was just so much talking, and it just wasn't engaging enough, because they've had that before, and honestly it made me think of Attack of the Clones, which will probably make you guys think of it as way worse than it is, just because everyone has like instant hate for the prequels. It was just that there was a lot of talking. This had more action than that did, because that didn't even open, like it had an explosion in the beginning, but there wasn't even a lot of action in that movie until like that pseudo chase scene, which was kind of cool. But that was like minor stuff, and then a ton of talking. This wasn't as bad as that for sure, but that one chunk, which I do believe was like 20, possibly it probably wasn't even 30 minutes. It just felt like it, maybe. But other than that, it was fun. That was just like that one part, and you'll know it when you see it, because it's like, yeah, it took a dip, and then it's just talking, and then it's just talking again, and then just more talking, and then it starts to spread out, and the talking becomes more entertaining as it's leading towards some extra stuff. But during that one portion, it's just like, man, I wish they would just throw in some minor action sequence or something that just kind of kicks it up a little bit. And it's like that one chunk was just a bit of a lull, but still super awesome. I do have to say it's very fun. Of course, I would love to know what you guys thought about this movie, so please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts about it, your least favorite parts about it. If you'd rather save those comments, you can just do that and, you know, jump on over to my spoiler discussion, which we'll definitely have an annotation, or it will have there will be a link in the description. I won't do an annotation because I always forget those, but there will be a link in the description for that if you just want to head over there. But if you want to keep it vague, of course, I would love to know what you guys thought about it. So please comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.